I will more or less focus a bit with a few examples on the last 5 or 6 ones. And well, there's one word you see on the bottom, that's boycott. And that brings me to a point where I have to address a problem we are facing at the moment in Germany, as some of you may have read. And I should still explain why I'm principally against boycotts. In all my 50 so-and-so years of work in this field, I found it important to first listen to the individuals, and be it artists, be it experts, and their stand on issues. And if I find colleagues who are critical of their own government's policies, why should I boycott them? So it was a pleasure for me, for example, to circumvent boycott of Serbian colleagues some time ago, and putting me into EU conferences via our institute. And I was also proud to go to Haifa University to talk with colleagues there on cultural policy. Why should I boycott these people when I know how they think about certain issues? Next. Now, this is the case I was just referring to. It's Kassel Documenta, the largest, or one of the largest arts exhibitions worldwide, and it's a world exhibition. And here we have a different format this year with mainly collective groups being represented at this show, collectives from the Global South. And yeah, well, what happened then is a large poster, it's huge actually, was presented for 1 day or 1.5 days, and then had to be removed due to certain pressures. Actually, this was directed against colonialist, imperialist strategies, which are still felt in parts of the what is called Global South today. And I'm quite sure, let me put it this way, that the 2 figures from among many hundred pictured on this huge poster that had created problems, I'm pretty sure that nobody who isn't anti-Semitic could have become anti-Semitic by these 2 figures. In fact, it was taken away because one of them is shown here, because some people thought this would be anti-Semitic and couldn't be shown. In fact, I would say it should have been stayed, because that would have given us a chance for true cultural education and for open debate about anti-Semitism, including also the other issues put on this poster. This is not only my opinion, but also, for example, of the director of the Anne Frank Academy and many others who have voiced protest against this, the disappearance of this. Now, I need to present other examples of images deemed to be offensive. These are from 2004 and 2015. And of course, the difference here to those in Kassel at the Documenta is that some of the authors of these pictures have been murdered, or at least threatened with murder. And the other difference to the Documenta case is that these pictures were not censored, but rather politicians from all colors and all countries from Europe united and defended the right to show such pictures. Freedom of expression. That's where we are and what we should be considering. Now, while saying that, I'm aware of the fact that, of ambiguities, or let's say even potential dangers of some types of stereotypes. In our visual age, they are so easily redistributed via so-called social media channels. I think this is one of those real challenges for cultural education we should not ignore. Now, another issue mentioned in my list at the beginning, autocratization and closed forms of identity politics. This is actually something for a group like us in the Compendium, where many cultural policy researchers are together, should be of concern, that there is not enough emphasis on this topic yet in our agendas, in our research agendas. And so I'm thankful for Luis and for Mariano that they actually taken up the issue. And I can only say, hail to the champion of illiberal democracies and of his view of, as he calls it, artsy, crafty human rights mumbo jumbo. Well, not much to expect for freedom of artistic expressions there. But there are more differentiated views of how to deal with delicate issues. Now this work of art comes from Estonia. And in Estonia, this is also a hot issue, of course, that so many people have actually Russian origin or speak Russian today, and how to put this into a meaningful piece of art. I think this is one where you can see how it can be done. I was supposed to talk about, but I will skip a few things now, about what we are doing at the moment in the Compendium context, because some debate and some findings should be presented in the course of this year. And I'm not going into all details now. I just want to say we need to be aware of the fact that the main United Nations legal instruments existing to protect freedom of expression do not mention artistic freedom specifically. So we always need to be clear about this. Sorry, about this this fact that what we can be asked to be protected is part of the general right to free expression, and that is an important thing to know, and that's why I prefer to not speak of artistic freedom, but of freedom of artistic expressions. In our research, we want to focus on barriers to freedom of artistic expressions. And we have a few issues we should study. In particular, I mentioned them here: political climate, we just saw it, illiberal democracy, if that's possible, censorship forms, a very new phenomenon, the cancel culture. You remember this heated debate about whether or not someone else than a black woman could translate the inaugural poem presented when Biden became president, you know. This is a debate that really goes to the heart of our problem. How far can freedom of expression be restricted? Because the author didn't ask for a black woman to be the translator into other languages. We have a few resources in this effort to map the state of freedom of expression in the compendium context, in addition to the compendium itself. And they are shown here on the slide, and some more possibly could come if others among you have ideas. These index systems I mentioned there, they are usually of a less helpful format, because they are focusing either on media as such only, and then only on journalistic work, and then it doesn't help so much for our topic of freedom of artistic expressions. But I show you an example in a moment where it comes closer to what we really are striving for. Actually, Carmen knows this because a few years ago I was already presenting at the ERICarts Congress a quick and dirty analysis of the compendium content regarding freedom of expression. And our first idea is, okay, let's go on and continue this evaluation for the later years. And then we suddenly discovered, oh, in 2018, we suddenly changed the grid, and suddenly freedom of expression was mentioned several times in the grid, and people had to answer. So all the newer compendium country profiles were suddenly not comparable anymore to the older ones. I didn't think of that in the first place, and then I got terrified by the results, because these figures suddenly tripled, and it was incomparable anymore. Well, anyway, but as I said, there's hope, and there are a few serious index systems. One of them is the VDEM data collection in Sweden at a university. It's not driven by finances from dubious sources like in some other cases. It's a university project, and what you see here, blue is the best standard, white is the worst, how the situation looked 60 years ago. Then you see 30 years later, suddenly we were on a road to general freedom of expression in Europe. And now you see the latest one, 2021. Oh, and it's going back again in the shading. And okay, sometimes these types of visual appearances help us a bit to understand the problem. Let me close by just saying or repeating what the Minister of Culture said this morning. Culture has its own flow. Maybe I should say culture has to have its own flow. And that's what we should be fighting about. Thank you.